great to see all your faces out there, ladies, gentlemen, and narcs. Everybody look around and see if you can spot the narcs. They're the ones who look like hippies. There are approximately 12 million Discordian popes now. Originally, Malaclips the Younger, the founder of Discordianism, had cards printed, and he'd just hand them out to everybody he met, making them popes. And then I printed the Pope card in the Illuminating trilogy. But then I was living in Ireland, and the Pope came to Phoenix Park and announced, the guy who thinks he's the only Pope, he announced that bishops could give indulgences over television, which was a new thing in Catholic doctrine. And I got the idea, well, if they can do indulgences on television, I can do pontifications. And so instead of giving out cards, every time I got on radio or television, I made the whole audience popes. Eventually, we'll make every man, woman, and child on this planet a pope.
Most religious people take themselves too damn seriously, which is why they act like such damn fools. I'm using the word damn deliberately for the paradoxical effect.
Like I'm also a Buddhist, a Taoist, and a Confucian, as well as a Discordian, a subgenius, and a witch. I will officially announce that everybody in this room is now a Discordian Pope, just like me. Spectacles, testicles, brandy, cigars.
Spectacles, testicles, brandy, cigars.
You are all absolutely infallible and don't take crap from anybody. Okay, here we are. Well, I'm an ordained Pope of the Church of the Subgenius, which means I'm absolutely infallible, so don't dare contradict anything I say. As for my relationship with Ivan Stein, I deny all the rumors.
Remember, you're only infallible about your own nervous system. You know what's going on in your own nervous system, what realities you're creating out of the infinite flux of being. You don't know anything about anybody else's reality unless they tell you about it. You've got to listen very sympathetically to understand them. See, so it's a limited infallibility.
Let me remind you that being a Catholic priest is a pretty dreary business. Outside of altar boys, you're not supposed to mess around with anyone else. But at least this explains why the selection of the Pope is wrapped in so much secrecy. You know, all the cardinals retire into a room, the doors are locked. Nobody knows what goes on in there. Eventually smoke comes out, and that means they've made their decision. Nobody knows how they make their decision. I figure it's sort of like the way they cast the lead in a porn movie. They all lay it down on the table, and somebody goes around with a ruler. The bigger the willy, the better equipped you are to be the head of a church, which is based on the idea that the willy makes you superior to anybody who doesn't have a willy. I can't believe I started out a good Catholic school boy. There must have been some good times. When I think of my childhood, I just remember how frightened I was of the nuns at the school I went to, how sadistic they were. There was so much mystery and ambiguity about everything. That's why there's so much in my novels. But adults never gave a straight answer to a child about anything. Everything was lies, hypocrisy, evasions. I knew there was something going on they were hiding from me, and it used to scare me. I wasn't quite sure what it was. It might have something to do with the Wolfman or the Frankenstein monster. I didn't know what the hell it was. And I didn't trust them at all. At one point, sometime around 7 or 8, they admitted there was no Santa Claus. And as soon as I recovered from the shock, my next thought is, when are they going to admit there's no God? They never did. I often thought of myself as
in terms of that old Chinese proverb, the wise become Confucian in good times, Buddhist in bad times, and Taoist in old age. And I've always had a lot more sympathy for those three religions, in quotes. And I'm trying to use the Occidental ones like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all of which seem to me fanatical, intolerant, violence-prone. This whole Judeo-Christian monotheistic trip has been the worst nightmare this planet has ever endured. They just never stop killing one another. Meanwhile, the Confucians, the Taoists, and the Buddhists, each in their own way, have tried to create a peaceful and amicable society.
I try to think logically, and the result of that is most people think I'm a satirist. Consider the difference between Federal Reserve notes and counterfeit money. I have been meditating on that ever since I read Ezra Pound's cantos at the age of 18, as many cantos as they were then. He wrote more later. But studying Pound's cantos got me very much involved in this question of why do Federal Reserve notes pass as money? Well, as far as I've read all sorts of explanations. I've followed this argument through the pages of economics journals, books, and so on. I never found a reasonable explanation except the one I made up myself. If you or I or the mafia print a whole bunch of money in our basement, no matter how good it looks, it's not real money. You know why? Because we don't have a magic wand. When the Federal Reserve prints money, prints paper, they wave a magic wand over it and it becomes money. If you don't have the magic wand, it's a counterfeit. And I have yet to see any book on economics that gives like an explanation that makes as much sense as that one.
I am continually astonished at all the people in the world who think they have the answer to everything. None of them ever suspect they might be cosmic schmucks and have the wrong answer. And I find the only explanation that makes sense to me is in Korzybski's Science and Sanity. These people don't know how to use language properly. They're using language in an overly dogmatic way, which sets their brain into overly dogmatic modes. So they think dogmatically, they perceive dogmatically, they even smell dogmatically, they hear dogmatically. They're locked in a trap of fixed neurosemantic circuits in their brains. Whereas knowing I'm a cosmic schmuck, I always think of at least 5 alternatives.
Discordians don't have dogmas, which are absolute beliefs. We have katmas, which are relative meta-beliefs. And the central Discordian katma is, as I said before, any affirmation is true in some sense, false in some sense, meaningless in some sense, true and false in some sense, true and meaningless in some sense, false and meaningless in some sense, and true and false and meaningless in some sense. And if you repeat this 666 times, you will achieve supreme enlightenment in some sense.
We are living in very weird times. The world is changing faster and faster, which I think is due to the acceleration of information flow in the modern world. Information is increasing, and the transmission of information is going faster and faster due to internet and the whole computer revolution. I don't know why so many people spend so much time in a pessimistic reality tunnel. It's a miserable place to live. But some people feel if they leave it, they feel guilty. If you're not in a pessimistic tunnel, you're not responsible. But once I get out of it, I never wanted to go back into it again.
If you can believe that the willy is really central to holiness, and that the Federal Reserve really has a magic wand and every other money is not real money, then the world begins to make sense. If you can't believe either of those doctrines, it looks like a large part of the world is run by raving lunatics or outright charlatans. I am not an atheist. I used to be an atheist, but I had to give up. I discovered I didn't have anything to say during a blowjob.
The high, which is what the SOG is afraid of. They don't want anybody to get high, because people who are high get happy, and people who get happy get ambitious and uppity and rambunctious. And they want everybody to be depressed. But the high is part of the cure. I think every goddamn disease in the world is improved by feeling happy and good. And any compound that not only relieves pain but makes you feel happy and cheerful and think of funny things is helping your cure. This Constitution was not created to establish a czarist tyranny. It was established to create a free society.
I was convinced Kafka was the most brilliant, insightful analyst of the modern world of all contemporary. I like Joyce better, but Kafka seemed to me to get to the essence of the modern condition. But even Kafka, in his wildest pages, never imagined something like the piss police. We live in a country which is based on two documents, the Declaration of Independence, which is not a matter of law, but it's supposed to be the theory on which our country is based, and the Constitution, which is supposed to be the basis of our laws. And nowhere in either of those is there any suggestion that we're going to found a government that will go around prying into people's bladders to see what they've been doing lately. I can't imagine this happening in any other country.
Let me switch gears with you a little bit. I'd like to talk about your interest in occultism. You've been a student, quite a student, I think, of the writings and teachings of Aleister Crowley, who was a writer about occult magical rituals. And I believe you've participated in a variety of magical rituals. What's that about?
Well, the background is I believe that what we perceive is based on the culture of our parents and our teachers and the people around us and on the language we speak. And I'm interested in ways of changing perception. And I have a lot of exercises I've tried for changing my ways of perceiving the world and myself.
Crowley's system of magic is a system of fucking with your brain until the impossible becomes possible, and you get out of your imprinted reality tunnel into an infinity of mirrors where anything is possible.
Bruno represents the point in our culture where science and mysticism were alive. They were both attempts to find out what the hell is going on in this universe by experimental method and by trust in the ability of the individual to figure out what the hell is going on just through the method of experiment.
And anyway, that's the background is experiments on altering consciousness and perceived reality tunnels.
In Bruno's day, it was the three terms were divided up differently. You had science and mysticism on one side and religion on the other side. Science and mysticism were allied in their struggle against religion. Science and mysticism were both based on experience, and they were both based on respect for the individual. The idea of science and mysticism was go out and discover for yourself. Find out what works. Find out how the universe is actually structured and how you relate to the structure of the universe. And so there were basically two areas of scientific exploration, the external and the internal. But they were both pursued by the same method, the experimental method.
Originally, I was just trying to find out what the hell is a mystical experience. But then I very soon got the idea of re-imprinting, and then I got the idea of using Crowley's magic along with the re-imprinting.
Ritual is to the internal sciences what experiment is to the external sciences. Mysticism, understood in that way, is basically a branch of science. It's a branch of neuroscience, what Timothy Leary calls neurologic, as distinguished from orthodox neurology, which involves dissecting animals or dissecting corpses or something. Neurologic is studying the nervous system directly by varying the parameters on which your nervous system functions.
There are different levels of reality, obviously, and the psychedelic level is one of the most fascinating ones, one of the most erotic, one of the most mystical, and above all, one of the funniest. I recommend it highly to everybody over 40. I'm not going to repeat Leary's mistake. I don't recommend it to anybody under 40. Over 40, you're on your own. You're responsible for yourself. Don't blame me for it.
Chapel Perilous is a stage in the magical quest in which you map popes turn out to be totally inadequate for the territory, and you're completely lost. And at that point, you get an ally who helps you find your way back to something you can understand. And then after that, you've got for the rest of your life, you got this question, was that ally a supernatural helper, or was it just part of my own mind trying to save me from going totally bonkers with this stuff? And the people I know who've had that kind of experience, very few of them have ever come to an absolutely certain conclusion about that.
The first edition of the Principia was 5 copies, and it was round off on the Xerox machine of District Attorney Jim Garrison in New Orleans. After office hours, Jim Garrison has never known his role in the evolution of... That's true, yes.
Praise Bob!
Praise Bob.
Yeah. Well, did Kerry Thornley have something to do with that?
Parts of the Principia were written by Kerry Thornley, the second Oswald, as he's known among his friends.
Yeah, he's a famous genius. Avoided by many. And beloved, beloved.
Most of the Principia was written by Malaclips the Younger, the omnibenevolent polyfather of virginity and gold. I wrote a few parts myself, and so did Josh the Dill, and Onrak the Backwoods, and Camden Benares, and other Discordian popes and saints. The main inspiration, of course, was Emperor Norton.
Spectacles, testicles, brandy, cigars. You're all popes. You're all absolutely infallible. I have the authority to appoint anybody a Discordian pope because I'm a Discordian pope. The first rule after you become a Discordian pope is to excommunicate every Discordian pope you meet. This is based on the basic Discordian principle: we Discordians must stick apart.
I think pain is a mistake. If I had been around at the creation, I would have had a lot of helpful suggestions, as Mencken said. And I would have said, we don't need pain. Just put a little neon light on the fire that lights up and says, see a doctor. And the friend says, hey, your sign is on, go see a doctor. You don't need pain to tell you. No, seriously, what I'm getting at is I think pain can be abolished. But I don't see any reason why all forms of pain can't be abolished with the proper drugs. And I think the government's attempt to control drug research out of fear that people may feel too good is the last dying gasp of the dinosaur age. I think we are governed by Tyrannosaurus Rex and velociraptors and types like that. I really think the abolition of pain is the noblest goal we can aim for. Also clean water for everybody and enough food. I think these are quite attainable goals. If society was saying these would be our goals. Spread clean water, adequate food, and the absence of pain all over the planet. Who would want to become a terrorist? What would they be angry about? What would they be mad enough about to start throwing bombs at somebody else?
What about the eye in the triangle?
It's rather inconspicuous, and I just want to point out how often the eye in the triangle is there. It pops up frequently, and this, of course, is the symbol of the Illuminati, the alleged secret society that controls the whole world, according to a lot of occult theories. And you'll find it on the back of your dollar bill, too.
And of course, we have plenty of genital mutilation, although it's only practiced on women by people of Arabian descent. It's practiced on the whole male population by doctors who assure us the procedure is scientific and necessary. No scientific justification for circumcision has ever been published that makes any sense whatsoever. But the thing that the Mayo stresses is the doctors who do the circumcisions hear the baby screaming in agony, and it doesn't register on them. Why? Because they have patrist armored values. They've shut down their own emotions so they can't recognize anybody else's emotions. And infant screaming is just one of the side effects of normal procedure, just like slapping them on the backside right after they're born. Isn't that a great way to join the human race? Now, this patrist, matrist, armored, unarmored, or anal, oral, whichever way you want to classify these types of societies, I think it basically goes back to what I wrote about in Prometheus Rising. Right after birth is a period of acute imprint vulnerability, which Konrad Lorenz won the Nobel Prize for his writings on imprint vulnerability. There are periods of imprint vulnerability throughout life. There are especially sensitive ones right after birth. Now, you're either going to imprint human beings. I'm combining Timothy Leary and Eric Byrne here, if anybody wants to know where my terminology comes from. You're either going to imprint human beings as warm fuzzies, loving, nurturing, supporting critters that you can trust and love and who love you, or you're going to imprint them as cold pricklies, hostile, vicious, dangerous characters that you want to have as little to do with as possible. Obviously, the maximum cold, prickly imprint means a totally autistic child, or else one that grows up to be a criminal sociopath. Those with a warm, fuzzy imprint are the ones who grow up to be friendly, generous, outgoing, full of humor, nice people in general, the kind of people you wish all your neighbors were. I think that, to quote Leary again, the essence of evolutionary intelligence is to find the proper habitat. The thing to do is to live where you're surrounded by warm fuzzies instead of where you're surrounded by cold pricklies. And it's quite obvious. You can tell almost, just in a few minutes conversation, you can tell whether the person you're talking to has imprinted humans as warm fuzzies or as cold pricklies. And if they have imprinted human beings as cold pricklies, you will find that they grew up in a culture or a subculture in which genital mutilation probably exists. If it doesn't, other forms of brutality to children exist. But beating children is common. But usually you do find some kind of genital mutilation. The slap in the backside right after birth greets them, so they know right away they're surrounded by cold pricklies. Who the hell would hit a helpless infant at a time like that when they're just born? How can these fucking doctors do it? Well, as Wilhelm Reich said, nobody can recognize an emotion in others unless they've experienced it themselves. Most doctors in this patristic and armored anal society cannot recognize the sadistic things they're doing because they don't recognize the pain expressed by the people who suffer it because they have armored themselves so much they don't have any emotions left at all. Isn't this an extreme, paranoid, crazy view? No wonder they burned Reich's books. They're probably going to burn DeMayo's book as soon as they find it. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about it. Maybe I'm just hastening the day when the government comes and burns that book too.
I have a lot of hope. I may be the last optimist left on the planet for all I know. But at the same time, I see really terrible problems and injustices and violence all over the place. I just think we're heading for a point at which that will no longer be viable. Somehow we're going to have to find a more decent form of society if we're going to survive at all. Here's to the good nuns for telling me what books not to read.